You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got myself, we got the Occult Reject mad scientist Liza with us today. We got the spiritual gangster Catharsis, and we got the guest Kelli. Before we get into the guest, I'm going to let the other rejects introduce themselves for the new listeners. Liza, if you would like to let everybody know what your deal is, please.
Thank you. Liza Solis on Twitter, Solis Lisa, and check out the occultresearchinstitute.org, where we have a lot of good stuff from great contributors.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Teresa, let everybody know what's up with you and your amazing show as well.
Yeah, so I've got the Spiritual Gangsters podcast, and people can connect with me on X and Instagram at TS Gangsters Pod.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And today, very happy to have this guest on. We got Kelli Hansel. She is somebody that has listened to the show for a while, and we've talked a little bit, and she has reached out to me. And she, I do love having people on who have had books. I think the fact if you can even focus to write one, that's amazing to me. So, I do like getting people who do that, and I do feel. And I know other people who have talked about wanting to write books, and I feel like when they want to do that, it's actually a huge passion for them to even get into it and start doing it. And just something about that, when I see someone having passion in the work that they're doing, I appreciate that, and I like, having guests on who are into stuff, who are like that with their work. She's very big into yoga and chakras, and she does have the book Sacred Catharsis. Today we're going to talk about that, which is, chakras and yoga. And that's another reason why I have Teresa on, because she does have experience with that before. And we have even talked about it before on the Occult Rejects. But that was a long time ago, and I figured it was ready for an update, and we got Kelli with us today. So I'm finally going to shut up, and I'm going to let Kelli introduce herself. Kelli, if you can, please let everybody know, even though I have your links on the bottom already, let everybody know where they can find your stuff, and just maybe a little bit about who you are and what got you into all this.
Awesome. So I'm Kelli Hansel, and you can find me on Instagram at darkmoon_Kelli with an I. And my website is kellihansel.com, where you can find the book, Sacred Catharsis. It's my first full-length book that's been published. I write in all sorts of genres, including journalism, memoir, poetry, fiction, all of those. So those are out there. I've worked in radio, podcasting. I'm currently a yoga instructor, done all sorts of things, but from the time of my earliest memories, I have always been a seeker of truth. I don't know if it's because I've been here before or if it's what they, refer to as old soul or what it is, but I've just always felt connected to that seeking path. And so I really can't remember a time where I've not been connected to energy in what I later realized maybe was a different sort of way, or with more of an awareness of it anyway. I think everyone connects to energy and so on. But I think in so many ways we're asked to ignore it or think about it, differently. And so I've always been like that. And as I grew, I started understanding and receiving names for what it was that I was experiencing, So as a kid, you don't know, I'm feeling the energies of the body that everyone has, and these energies have centers in the body, and I'm feeling other people's energy, and I'm feeling, you don't realize that it's just another sense, like sight, taste, smell, touch. And I live really rurally. So there's only about 1,500 people in my town. 20,000 in my entire county, so we all know each other, and I'm in the Appalachian Mountains. So in many ways, I'm 3 hours from the closest airport. And in many ways, we're kind of cut off from a lot of mainstream things. We get it through TV and radio news, and now the internet. So for a really long time, I wasn't aware of a lot of things, and yoga was one of them. I actually found yoga through Jane Fonda. Which is,
However it happens, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I
Which
can
is
see
kinda
that though.
funny.
I can see that though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was working out because I was experiencing some chronic conditions, and I was trying to find any way possible to relieve myself. And it was back in the mid 90s, and I was trying to find answers. And so I was using her workout videos, and she came out with a yoga video, and I did the video. And when I finished, I was like, I was really terrible at that, but something's different about this. This is different. I feel different. And it was enough for me to want to explore why. And so I just kept doing it. And so now I've been doing yoga for 24 years, So before yoga, I was into a lot of, I guess, what you would call esoteric occult things. Some of them without even realizing that that's what they were, because it was something that I just did on my own, and others was from seeking out through books and various things. But then, of course, with the internet, which I really didn't experience until I was in college, here this mountain woman, isolated in a rural community, is using Sanskrit words and, doing yoga and opened up to all these world philosophies, So, which is just, if I lived in any other time, that just wouldn't be the case, which is cool. But anyway, I could go on forever about it.
Nice. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would, you had said something about I think feeling like I'm different for me. And I know it's for me, even for me, again, when I got into magic or practicing magic, I would come across a lot of things where people that I would say now that I would probably think more about their opinions than I used to in the past would always say, as boring as this sounds, you're going to have to learn how to meditate. And you should really start with that and chakra work. And it's just oh, well, I want to start with the rituals, and I want, the sigils and talismans, and, I want to, curse people and do this, whatever, and you're like, that sounds boring and stupid, But I will admit, for me, learning to be able to meditate and doing chakra work and trying to balance myself, I really did, honestly, probably felt I felt a lot from that than a lot of other things I was actually doing. And it did actually mentally and physically make me feel better. Now, I wasn't doing yoga, but, I'm sure, which is very important with this stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into it, is I do think if you're holding in this horrible energy, it's going to affect you physically regardless. You know what I'm saying? So I do even think working on that stuff and trying to, transmute it, remove it, ground yourself, however way you're changing maybe that frequency that's just screwing you up. For me, I think changing that will actually, help mentally and physically. And I definitely think I felt that. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that, that is another thing why I'm kind of, big into this topic. It's just that I haven't covered it much, but it is something I think definitely works for me, when it comes to yoga, well, chakras really. When I did a lot of meditation and started working on them, I've heard even people say this before in the past, and I'm like, you're just woo-woo. This is bullshit. My opinion, you can actually feel them fuckers. You actually feel that. I remember one time when I had a baby cat, a kitten, and of course they had their nails, and he was he would come in the bed and he was like a Tasmanian devil, and he would just be spinning around with his claws, scratching the shit out of you. And I'd be like, oh, calm down, dude. But I remember for some reason, I was like, yo, it feels like that cat I remember, just spinning around, going all over the place. You feel it's almost like a spinning ball, but it's wild. And when I started feeling that, I don't know. It's very weird, but I do believe that shit is real and it's there. There's something up with that. So that really does amaze me and myself. You know, it's like, what's really going on with our energetic body if we can actually feel specific pinpointed parts? It's just wild to me.
Mhm.
So thank you again for coming on and talking about this stuff. I know in your book, maybe if you want to, you know, I understand you also want to sell your book, so you don't want to talk about the whole book. You know, you want people to buy it and read it and hear stuff that you didn't cover. But one thing I thought maybe might be interesting for you is if, like, maybe you wanted to kind of go along. Like I do, one thing I like how your book starts off with, you know, the ground chakra or the earth, you know, the first one instead of the top coming down. I thought that was actually interesting how you did it, the bottom going up. I've never really seen it done like that in a book, and I think that's pretty good. I don't know if maybe you kind of want to just maybe go through and touch on each chakra and, like, you know, maybe give a little bit of an understanding of from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but first, I would like to comment on what you said about
Sure.
the way that you approached magic. You know, you wanted to go into the ceremonial ritual magic first and all of that stuff. And I want to be upfront about the way that I view it all, which is not to say that my way is right. You know, I don't believe in that. But I don't believe in a right way. But for me, it's all the same thing. Okay, so some people, and I truly believe this, can do the same thing in meditation that takes someone else a ritual to do. Because what is ritual? 100. It's a way to make the brain work, the way to conduct our energy. You know, sometimes our brain needs these tools and these tangible things to make it conduct in a certain way. Other folks don't need those. You know, they need to settle down, you know, tame their thoughts and work it through meditation or through the chakras. But it's all toward the same goal. It's just different tools. Right. And so, yes, but again, you know, I think for anyone who wants to be successful in magic or working with energy, the place to work is within yourself.
You nailed
Because
it.
if you're not conducting it from a grounded place and your intentions are not exactly connected, or you're not in alignment with your true will, it's going to go haywire. It's not going to go well. So I really do feel like it's all the same thing, just different ways of approaching it.
I totally agree with that. And that has even been something that I've said from my own experience. Now, I think when it comes to herbs, crystals, stuff like that, maybe it helps to be on your altar, but I do understand maybe, like, there's actually something there with, I think, either the colors or the resonance. There's something trying to tell you with that, besides the health benefits of it. But my opinion, a lot of stuff on the altar or that I would set up, after I had a magical experience, I was like, oh, I can see why this is all there to try to make a connection to something I'm about to do, but I don't think I need it anymore. And I was on White Rabbit Radio, and we're talking about my magical experiences and crossing the abyss. And, you know, I had said that I had not really done it in a while, and, like, kind of like, and then implied, I said, but I think this winter I may, you know, I was like, I think I might actually, you know, fuck with magic again a little, to an extent. And I think the kid assumed that meant I was still doing rituals. And then I was like, no, I said, the funny thing is that since I've had these experiences, any times I've ever messed with magic or pushed myself close to crossing the abyss, I'm just sitting down and closing my eyes. I said, I don't do the rituals at all anymore. I said, I don't need it. You know, so I do think there's something with that I think a lot of it might actually be just things to connect to the mind, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's great to hear someone else say that.
Yeah,
That's the filter, right? If we're doing anything, it's through that consciousness. That's the filter. You know, we're individuated, or that's the goal anyway, but we're also part of the collective. And it's consciousness to consciousness. It's consciousness to field. Which is all the all anyway.
Yes.
You know? So it's just what will allow you to get out of the idea that you're just flesh and bone, you know, and allow you to expand and get that feeling. But once you start to get that sense, and once you truly believe it, I don't think that you need such elaborate ritual anymore. I think you can do it with a feeling. You can do it sometimes almost instantaneously, depending on how in alignment you are with that desire, with that, and it being, your dharma or your true will, your path, So yeah, I totally think that's the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's nice to hear somebody else say that, because I really do believe that. I even do think, I don't want to take up too much time on it, but like, there's even stuff about rituals where I think it's like, they might actually be more of showing you the physical change going on in certain parts of your body than anything really, and I even think it's almost like, if you understand what we're really telling you with this, you're actually figuring out one of the secrets. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there's a little bit, there's definitely hidden shit, in my opinion, in the pentagram ritual. I do think that, and possibly the hexagram ritual, is more or less showing you changes within your eyeball at times. I could be wrong, but again, like, then how much is that really needed to do if it's just imitating a change going on? Maybe if you understand now the change that's going on, it doesn't matter. Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an individual thing. I think some people probably really do need that.
Oh yeah.
And other people need other things.
I did for years before it worked,
Yeah. Whatever works, right? It's whatever. And back to, the chakras in general, whether or not you believe in them literally, I don't think matters so much either. If you look across so many different things, like the sacraments, Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, Rudolf Steiner's stages of human development, there's so many different hierarchies of development, of philosophical ways to explain our consciousness and how we set up, that are just the chakras explained in a different way. The chakras correlate to the Tree of Life, and vice versa, for example, and definitely Steiner's, his 7 years, those increments of 7 years of human development, they align right with the chakras and what each of them mean. And so it's all the same thing. Just like, so I would describe myself as an omnist. I believe there's one underlying truth, and each of the various religions, philosophies, what have you, are just culturally contextual ways of describing the one truth, right? I believe that's the same thing with the chakras and all of these other ways, like whatever that person needs to absorb that truthful information. So you can use the chakras literally, like you said, you feel them. I feel them too. Like, I believe in them literally, I'll be honest. I actually read other people's chakras, so I can do it from a distance. I can do it with you in the room and receive intuitions about those chakras. I don't talk about it a lot, but I do that for folks. So I feel them literally. I can feel my own when I pay attention. But whether or not you can feel them literally or you believe in them literally, it doesn't matter. They are a really great scaffolding for doing inner work. So the themes that they bring into question, for example.
That is a good point too. Like even if they didn't exist, maybe even thinking like working on yourself in that way would probably help anyway.
Yeah,
I see what you're
like
saying,
a scaffolding and that's one of the reasons I went from bottom up in the book.
Makes sense to me.
How many people actually ever reach the top?
Well, you know what?
Really doing focused inner work.
And I'm even going to say this, maybe you won't take this as like a positive thing, but I remember reading in 2 books that the people suggested not going from the bottom to the top. Now, at the beginning, and maybe you shouldn't, but I will say once I started going from the bottom to the top, my experiences got a lot more wilder and probably had much more advancement in spiritual experiences. So, I mean, I think it's a good thing to maybe start from the bottom to the top and just take your time.
I think bottom to top would be like the best way to do it.
I don't know
what you think, Kelly, because that's like how it should be built. Like the bottom root chakra is like the most basic like functions. base emotions, if you don't have that in place, which I was going to bring up, whether people are aware of it or not, a lot of times when they have like chronic disease or illnesses, other symptoms, it's because energetically you have a problem. So like, depending on what your symptom is, say you suffer from, I don't know, irritable bowel syndrome, like maybe you should check what's happening like in your root chakra and like the parts of your life that have to do with like money and like your home and things like this. Like that can reflect in your physical body. So I think the more aware of your energy body that you are, it can only help you like in your daily life. I think you'd probably agree with that, Kelly.
Oh,
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think my opinion, and it's just an opinion, I wouldn't recommend anybody going from the top down.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest mistakes in spirituality and even just philosophical endeavors altogether, whether it's housed in a spiritual context or not, is bypassing the body, bypassing our physical experience and throwing it aside like, oh, it's impure. That's no different than sins of the flesh, and looking at the body as just something to be discarded and impure. What are we doing here if not experiencing our spirit through the body, right? The body is our main tool. Speaking of ritual, you can do with your body anything that you can do with ritual tools. Your body is your tool, right? It's what allows you to put a little bit of meaning to all these spiritual ideas. So,
not to interrupt you, but like I did a class one time at the OTO about magical weapons. And I remember like, we're going over all the different things that you could use. And like near the end, the girl who ran the class did even say, like the most powerful one is yourself. You're actually the main tool in the ritual. And so, then it was pretty profound when, that hit me when I was, starting this stuff.
Yeah.
It's true.
And if we bypass the body, if we bypass the way that we're showing up in our physical experience, which a lot of people, they don't want to look at their shadow. They don't want to look at those problems with how they interact with other people. They don't want to look at these patterns that they call fate, as Carl Jung would say. They don't want to look at those. They want to avoid those. They want to spiritually bypass them and go toward enlightenment or go toward the up here. And then it creates situations where people abuse their power, where people are they feel so spiritual that they're disconnected with the ways that they may actually be harming others, or that their life is dysfunctional and causing other people hardship because now these people have to take care of them because they're not functioning, so I think it's dangerous to bypass the groundwork. The groundwork is what sets the tone for awesomeness up here, and so going from the top down, I don't know that you would ever make it down, because you would be there's this and this, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, so wonderment that you become.
Don't we already got gravity doing that for us?
No, you know what? I think we see that in so many of those like spiritual, like life coach types, like they're all over social media and they're like, talking about chakras, aligning your life. They want to help you with your life. But like literally all they did was like read one book or like take a handful of classes, and they're like, now I'm an expert, and they're going to do all this work, like dealing with like the higher, like esoteric functions. Right. But really, like, that's not like how it's going to go, dude. Like, you're just going to be a mess learning from this person who's also still a mess. Although we all are. We are all works in progress, and nobody is perfect. But
yes, we are.
I think to realize that, it takes a certain level of humility, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would never presume to teach that to somebody. I'd be like, you know what? I can't.
Yeah.
Too much of a mess myself.
Yeah. And that's, to go back to that show with White Rabbit, but at the end, he started asking me things like suggestions. He's like, well, if any books. And I was like, well, I'm big into the Kabbalah. I'll suggest the Kabbalah book. And he's like, what about like rituals and stuff? I said, I'm not saying any of that. You're not putting that on me. I'm not telling anybody to do that shit. You know what I'm saying? It's on their own. Like I don't know. I'm not. I don't want to be responsible for somebody even misunderstanding something and screwing themselves up. You know,
Yeah.
do that on your own, my man. Like I did. You know. Teresa, I don't know if you got it out or not already, but before it did seem like you wanted to say something. I don't know if you.
I think I might have was wanting to say something earlier to when Kelly was talking about how she got into yoga in the first place and like the Jane Fonda videos, and it's sort of like it seems like kind of silly or like funny or whatever, right? But it's not. I got into yoga in a similar way. So I used to work with this girl who's like super hot. I was like, how do you have such a banging bod? And she's like, I do hot yoga. And I was like, okay, sign me up. Where do I do it? Like, let's go. Like, I'm going to the class. And then the only place I could find, like relatively close to me, I live in Toronto in Canada. And at the time, this is like 2004. I don't know. So the only place close to me was a Bikram yoga studio.
Oh, yeah.
So I did it. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? It wasn't the greatest, I'm not going to lie, but Bikram I would not recommend. But then there was another similar place called Moksha Yoga, which now I believe in the United States, it's called Modo Yoga. So if you see those studios near where you live, that's what it is. Another practice of hot yoga was basically started by two Bikram teachers who modified the Bikram sequence because it's too harsh, which it is. So I tried that. And then I was like, yeah, I'm going to like lose weight. I want to like get sexy. Like, let's go. And then by the end of the first class in the Moksha studio, I just experienced like this total euphoria like came over me. And I was like, what is this? Like in the end in like Shavasana, right? I was just like, oh my God, whatever this feeling is, I want more of it. And then I was just like, fully addicted to yoga for better part of like 10 years. So yeah, I totally get it. I went for one thing, but then I didn't care about the results. I just wanted to go for the practice. And then that led to a whole, journey into a bunch of other things. So that's how I got started too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yes. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that's one thing about yoga. Is whether you're practicing it through asana or more the meditative breath work, pranayama, what have you, it's going to show yourself to you in one way or another. You're going to bump up against yourself and you're going to feel the way the energy moves through your body, and you're going to hear the way that you talk to yourself when various situations come up. It really is a practice for life. What we do on the mat applies to what we do off the mat.
Absolutely.
In so many ways.
Sorry, that's what I was going to add also before, was that I haven't really practiced formally in probably a long, long time, like since I had kids, basically. So that's like 12 years. But everything that I learned on the mat, I can apply off the mat, which is the whole goal, is to basically like make your life a living meditation as much as possible, right? So you can just take those principles that you learned physically and then apply them, philosophically and spiritually, like in your daily life. So sometimes we forget, but can always come back to it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Something you had just mentioned, and not to like put you on the spot, because I know I had already said something else about maybe like we're going to go into the chakras, but you just mentioned Asana, and what was the other one? There's like, I know there's different forms of like, like visualization or breathing and stuff. And do you mind maybe like kind of touching on like those different forms of that? Because I don't think a lot of people may know that,
So
like there was one that you mentioned before. I know it was a specific.
Asana,
Yeah, those two things. Yeah, would you mind like kind of going over that stuff? And like, I don't know if you did. I don't know if you consider it really yoga, but I know like for me, a lot of times I would like sit in the God pose, which is just basically sitting in a chair straight though, and not moving. And like I would do certain breathing techniques, or I would do visualizations of things. I can't remember if there was a name for the visualization or not, or if that was even considered yoga. But I know the breathing stuff can kind of be considered that. If you don't mind, maybe kind of give people a little bit of a basic idea of what those are, maybe your experience doing it.
Sure. So, asana, which is basically just means yoga postures. And then even before what we think of as yoga postures, asana could also mean just the way that you sit, like you described, straight back in a chair. That's an asana, right? It's a posture. And originally it was more so the posture you took while meditating, right? And then over time it developed to where they strung together postures into sequences to move energy in different ways, to be able to feel energy in different ways. So that's the dynamic form of practicing yoga, which everyone or most everyone at least has some kind of image in their head. When you say yoga, you probably see someone in down dog or one of the warriors. That's asana. And that's the physical practice. Then you have pranayama, which is breath work. So it just means breathing. Prana meaning life force or the energy, like Star Wars force, and that's the various types of breath work using, and both in asana and in breathing, you use what's called bandha, which means locks. And they're the energetic locks. And there's three main ones, one in your pelvic floor, one at your navel center, and one in your throat, that you can use to direct your breath, which also directs energy, both up and down, and in all directions. And then you move on into the more meditative forms of yoga. So stealing the mind, for example. And when you get into the more meditative directions, there can be so many different ways to meditate, right? So you had the Theosophists, for example, that use the tattvas, the actual visual symbols, to meditate upon. Whatever will allow you to get past the chatter of thoughts and to what lies underneath.
And I think it's really important to say, as silly as whatever it is, for me, I'm going to be honest with you, I listen to children's guided meditations just to be able to start doing that. I have no problem admitting that, because that's what I had to do to get the chatter to calm down. It was something simple enough to where I could hold on to the picture it was designing me for to look at. It's where I had to start at. Well, but I was determined. I was like, there's something up with this meditation. People keep on saying to meditate. So I got to make it work somehow.
Yo, that's fucking funny. That's great.
Yeah,
honestly.
I felt it was like a story of like, it was almost like you're like walking like through like Lord of the Rings town or something. It was like giving you all this like descriptive, like, the lanterns on the walls and the cobblestone streets. And I was like, oh, this is, really painted a picture.
Start. I used to do in the beginning a lot of body scan. So like releasing certain parts of the body from the feet up. I used to do that a lot. It was like deep breath. And then later, like what works for me really well is like sound. So it's just like sound bath, and then I can just like release that way. But yeah, and actually meditation really helped my prayer life. I was very bad at prayer before. Yeah. Horrible, like in a formal way. I'm Catholic, so yeah, like to get through prayer. I don't know how like people do church like without having another understanding of spirituality, because I'm just like, do you even? Like,
I can see that.
There's no like connection there. That's what I think. Like the Eastern practices bring forth feeling, whereas the Western practices bring a structure. So that's like my understanding of like how I reconcile the two.
I like how you said that. I think I interrupted you too, Kelly. So I don't know if
No, it's fine, because that's, there's so many different ways to meditate.
Yeah.
And depending upon what the goal is, it's going to depend on what you pick, right? So some people, for example, will pick a mantra, like Soham, for example, or Satnam, which I use quite often. And they'll repeat that with the breath. Like if you breathe in, the sound is Sat, you hear it. When you breathe out, the sound is Nam, you hear it, in your head. And you just go with that, right? Then again, pictures, body scans, feeling, where do I feel the breath in my body? Just hyper focused, also focusing on everything at once, like all of your surroundings, so that then eventually they kind of fade out and you get to that center point. And what a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm bad at meditating because they still have thoughts. You're still going to have thoughts. That's still going to happen. You may notice that still point for brief moments, right? But it's eventually you start to learn not to chase those thoughts, just to let them be there, notice them. Oh, hey, and just keep going. But eventually, all of the yoga practices like asana they say, was originally developed so that adolescents who were learning to meditate could wear their body out long enough to sit.
Yeah, it's just to prepare you to sit.
Yeah.
That's the real stuff. Yeah. Exactly.
And so it wasn't so much about, yes, it was about physical fitness, but not like we think of physical fitness, right? So yeah, you can use yoga as exercise. Sure, I do a lot. But it's also my church. It's also my spiritual practice, the physical part of it. You can meditate while doing asana, so some people need to move. They can't meditate sitting still. I think it's what Thich Nhat Hanh popularized the walking meditation, having to move in order to bring about stillness. So it's all, again, just tools toward the goal of seeing yourself. And I think it was like, I don't know, I have a firm belief that if we want to affect the world in a positive way, we have to start with ourselves and the way that we impact others and their life. Because we have no power to change other people, but we have the power to work on ourselves. And I think that ripples out, in the way that we share and help others, and the information that we share, even like in this format. What's it for if not for practical use, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to bring it back to the chakras, Kelly, like you were saying, some people need to move in order to help them meditate and to help calm their mind. So I think movement is huge because it helps, like, energetically. You can work on specific areas of the body. Say you have some sort of emotional issue, you need to work on your heart chakra. You can open through your chest. You can project energy out, help clear, right? Because if you don't, it stays stagnant, and that's when it builds and it becomes problematic, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you asked originally what are the chakras, and we have not even touched on that.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I did want to add something in, and then we can get to it. So, whatever it is, what it is. But I think this is all a great discussion anyway, and I think it's really important what we're talking about, even with the movement and meditation. When I was having problems with meditating sitting still, I remember hearing something, and it's funny how it's like maybe I was meant to hear that at the time. I was a fan of James Wasserman, in a sense. He was in the OTO. Never met the man, don't know him. I can't say a damn thing about who he was personally, if he was a good person or not. He was a little different than most people in the OTO, so when he had something to say, I would sometimes pay mind to it. And I did think he had some positive things to listen to hear. He had said in a video that I was watching that sometimes these rituals are just a physical meditation to begin with, to get you into a state of something. And at that point, I started looking at them differently. That's when I even started doing them with my eyes closed and trying to envision me drawing the things that I was actually doing. I would actually start kind of incorporating breath work as I was doing the ritual. And then eventually it's like, as I was doing, when I would do the ritual and before I would state my, before I would do everything, I would kind of start working on my chakras then, because I've already kind of put myself into almost a meditation through everything that I was doing. And that made it easier, believe it or not, for me, I think, from when I started sitting back down in the chair again and doing it. I just think like I somehow looking at doing it in the movement over and over and over and over again, because I would do, a banishing ritual 2 or 3 times a day just as like, a magical regimen. So I was doing this stuff a lot, and I do think that helped me move from the movement meditation to sitting still with myself. I think that definitely actually helped with me bridge the gap. I just wanted to add that.
If I could interject, I'm not as fluent in yoga as y'all are. I wish I was. My first experience with yoga, I had started a spinning class because I was going to start training for a triathlon. And it was like offered after, and I was like, oh, well, I need to stretch for sure. Like I'll stay, whatever. And so I did my first yoga, and halfway through I'm lying on the mat and just like tears are just coming out of my eyes. And I'm like, why are my eyes leaking out of nowhere? And, you had that connection, right? And then every time I tried after, I couldn't get there again. Right. And so obviously it was just probably like a newbie experience, like a, unfiltered experience or what have you. But I always have problems sitting still, for sure. If I went for a run after a mile, I'm like, okay, let's go do something else. I'm bored, and it was this constant, just like, I'm bored. I need to go do something else. And when I started training, obviously you have to stay in for the long haul. And that in and of itself for me was like, oh boy, like I'm going to have to keep running, like past the mile, like we have to keep doing this. And it seemed like the training itself, I learned to stay. Like I learned to basically, I know you want to leave, like myself, I know you want to leave, I know you want to go do something else, but this is what we're doing right now. And it was that day in, day out, learning to stay, that I started to come close to that first day. I've yet to come close to that first day, but it was during the training itself, it felt like that was the labor. That was the hard part. And so like you did the triathlon, and it came and went, but it was in the training that you were like actually sitting and spending time with yourself and kind of like realizing, damn, I can't focus. Damn, I can't stay. Damn, I'm not as disciplined as I thought I was. And so you're starting to see those inner workings of yourself that I was like, oh. But one of the things that I will say, like in terms of movement of meditation, is that somewhere in all that, I remember coming back to work because I had taken some time off, and everything seemed to be going slower than me. And I felt like that movement meditation of running, that I was experiencing some sort of catharsis, some sort of like meditative state or whatever of running, and just that pacing and just that humming, that I stopped listening to music while I was running, just because you were just in that zone. But when I came back to work, it seemed like everybody was moving at such a fast pace, or like everything was just slowing down, and I could react quicker, but it seemed like I had the advantage of time. And I do feel that meditative state that I somehow tapped into during exercise or during running allowed for that. Like I became like the airbender or something like that.
Neo and picking out the bullet, Lisa.
Yeah, like it was like, but I mean, granted, it was like such a fraction. It was like nowhere near that, but it was
but that's what happens. It's called pratyahara, when the senses blur.
That's
it's
exactly
it's a really cool experience when that happens, and that's exactly what it was. Like meditation can be anything, whatever works for you. So like runners, that's a meditative state. Dance, that's a meditative state. Well, depends how hard you're thinking, but it can become that in that flow state, right? And whatever is going to allow your mind to detach. And what you're saying, like how you learn to stay with discomfort. That's huge. Yes. And that's a thing, just as a general comment, like on society, society tries to make us like dopamine slaves, right? For the next like little quick hit. And you have to learn to stay. When I'm unpracticed, like even like sitting for like a pedicure or a massage is hard to just sit there. And I'm like, wow, I really need to like pick up my meditation practice, because it's like such a temptation to just like, oh, I'm going to reach for my phone and like watch some reels, or like, it's difficult.
Yeah, no.
And imagine people who've never even contemplated attempting to break that cycle their entire life. Ooh, that's pretty crazy.
All I have to say, my hat's off to y'all, because that's awesome.
No, what you did, I couldn't do, Lisa.
No, like, but to Kelly and stuff like that, like, I'm like, seriously, that is amazing, you know, that y'all, you know, because just kudos. That's all I want to say.
I've had a lot of people who ran that I knew prior to podcasting and people that I've met now podcasting, and a lot of them all say the same thing, and these people run distances. They say it's as if you get into some meditative state, and the only way that they are able to do it is they say at some point you have to allow yourself to get into almost a meditative state, and your body is just like stuck on just doing that, and you're not even thinking about doing it anymore. Yeah. And I was like, that's some deep shit. I was like, yo, if you could do that, you could fuck with magic. Probably.
Yeah, no, like Teresa said, it's the flow state. You know, it's the flow state. And yeah, most people, they don't, the phone scrolling and all of that, that's all heady things. Most people want to avoid being in the body. And that's again, from the ground up, that's one of the reasons we have to embody. You know, we have to say, okay, we're here. I'm going to be here and I'm going to figure out what I'm doing here. Right. But even what you were saying, though, Lisa, is I lift weights as well. So I probably lift weights as often as I'm doing yoga. And I call my weightlifting my yoga as well. Any movement that puts you into that flow state or that allows you to feel like, hey, okay, I'm having a hard time focusing. Any type of movement that shows you to yourself, I consider that yoga. You know, not just the postures of yoga, you know, that are officially called yoga, right? Martial arts, in any movement, like you were saying, Teresa, any movement can become that. Absolutely. Because of its ability to show us to ourselves.
I love how you said that, Kelly.
Yeah.
Shows us to ourselves. That's perfect.
I like that too.
Well, you know what I would even say eventually at some point with meditation, I started realizing that one of the weird fleeting thoughts of just like society that would normally take me off, I think I started realizing the things that I didn't like about me, like about myself, that started taking me out of my meditation. And that's when you're like, maybe I should change that. You know, so that was like, even for me, how I started getting, I guess, maybe more into the spiritual aspect is because I started having these thoughts of like my character and my morals, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
And that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's going to be, or it can be, yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, I'm not going to go there voluntarily.
Yeah.
And
I think that even came from like sometimes even like looking to change certain things. You're like, wow, I'm still acting like that because there's this deep issue that I actually haven't changed.
Yeah. And that's
that was somewhere completely different than I thought, you know?
You think you're done, and then it's like, oh man, there's still more.
Never done.
Never ends.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Something else I did want to ask, because I think it is an interesting thing, and again, we're not getting onto the chakras yet, but with breathing practices, from my experience, and you know, it's funny how like there's been times like, you know, being in the OTO, sometimes you'd see some people that would just come and go. They would just stop by every once in a while, and there were a few people that like that I remember because of like me thinking that they might have been like a little weird. And I think more of, sometimes I look back and I think it's just more of that I was actually not of an understanding and didn't understand what they were saying. I didn't have the experience of the knowing. And I remember like one dude explaining to me how just through breathing practices, you know, he could pretty much send himself somewhere else or almost to like a womb type state. And like later on down the road in my magical experiences, in my opinion, forgetting about him even saying that, when I started getting into breath work, you know, even I'm going to admit, even when I started using my robe with the hood that covered my mouth, I do think there might be something there with the breathing to help induce a magical experience. Do you think that's actually possible through breath work to like really almost like bring yourself to like an experience?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do believe that. Believe it. I mean, it can sound a little weird or creepy, and it's like you almost have to wonder like what's really going on. Maybe is it the lack of oxygen that is causing it or something? But bringing yourself to a place through breathing work can definitely take me places I haven't experienced before.
just like introducing psychedelics or any other
Yeah.
drug, when you're breathing, you're altering the chemicals in your body. You can alter the alkalinity of your blood, the oxygen that's reaching the brain or not, so, and that's going to introduce different states of consciousness. Some of this breath work can get really dangerous. You can really harm yourself through breath work as well.
Oh, sure.
So, it's something to really be careful with. There's some extreme ones out there. Yeah.
No.
So
I
if someone's
definitely agree with
wanting to induce a state, please be careful.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. That is true. That's
But
like
yeah, it's totally.
I think it's
It's the
definitely doable. Yeah. All right, so now maybe we'll start with the chakras. We'll get onto that. You don't have to spend too much time on each one. Maybe we'll just, a couple of things here and there.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I wrote the book is to bring a practical association to the chakras, I guess you should say. Like, how do I use this information for myself, my life? And so what I did was I took my inner work that I had gone through up to that point. So I finished it. It was published in 2021, so it's been a minute. But the work that I had done with myself up to that point through each of the chakras, and showed, like, through the themes of the chakras, how we could take those themes and apply it to our own experiences, our life, to have a better understanding of ourselves, our patterns of behavior, our patterns of thought, and how we show up in the world. So I started with the ground because that is our first experience, right? So the Muladhara chakra, which is the root chakra, color deep red. And the chakras are energy centers in the body. They correlate along the spine. There's hundreds of actual chakras around your body, on your hands. Your hands have chakras. But the 7 major ones go along your spine. And the Muladhara chakra is in the pelvic floor, rectum, and sex organs, legs. And the theme of Muladhara is the community that you're born into, right? So that's your first experience of the world. And that community that you're born into starts to shape the way that you see the world, right? They'll shape whether or not you feel the world is for or against you, whether it's a safe place to be or not, whether or not you have a sense of belonging and security comes from that root and your community. So your community of origin, your family of origin as well as family. Then you move up into the pelvis. So the lower, under the navel, the lower pelvic region, womb area, for womb having folks. And that's the Svadhisthana chakra. And so that's the orange color. And it's the place where we first begin to touch upon the way that we interact with others as two people coming together, or small groups, right? That's also the most base seat of our creativity. Obviously so, because it's the genitals, and the reproduction is included in that for both male and female folks. So creativity artistically as well, all creativity. It doesn't just have to be giving birth and such. But it is the frame of our interactions, how we take what we learned from that root and our sense of belonging or not belonging, and then how we translate that into the way that we interact with other people. Then you move up, and this is the Manipura chakra, which is in the solar plexus, so around the navel and above, like between heart and Svadhisthana. And this is where we become an individual. So we interact with others to see, okay, who are we as compared to these folks? And then we move it up and start to become an individual person. So that's the seat of your personal power, focus, and will. In other traditions, you'll hear it called the Dantian or the Hara. You've probably heard the term fire in the belly. right? Or if someone's scared, they may be called yellow bellied, for example,
wow.
and that
I've
comes
heard
from
that.
cholera, actually. Um, like vomiting up bile, it was yellow. And so they're yellow belly, they have cholera. Um, and so the color is yellow of the Manipura chakra. And so this is where we begin to identify the I, or the small s self, and how we show up in the world as an individual. So that's the lower triangle. So if you can think of two triangles stacked with the apex pointing down, apex pointing up, right? You've got two upper and lower triangle. Then you have the heart, which is next, which is obviously in the heart space, and your arms. And the heart is the bridge between the lower triangle and the upper triangle. Again, one of the reasons you want to start at the bottom, because the heart takes what you've developed here, takes all these things that you've learned, and like, okay, what is my service? What is my purpose? How do I take this information and do something in the world? And do something energetically, do something spiritually, do something up here. You know, how do I make this better or a reality, right? And that color is green, and it's called Anahata chakra. And yeah, it's about service. It's about love, right? Love of self, love of community, you know. Then you take it on up, and here we're getting into the upper triangle, and you've got the Ajna chakra, which is a light blue, and that's where the truth and communication comes from. So each chakra in the lower has a cousin in the upper. So also in this throat center, for obvious reasons, because this is where we're communicating from, right? It's also the seat of creativity in the upper triangle. So here you got very base, tangible creativity. Here you've got the more etheric creativity, the more intellectual, right? And this is with your ability. Can you speak your truth? Are you able to communicate it? Do you know what it is? And so many of us don't. So again, there's that. And then you come up to third eye, right? Which is about an inch above the bridge of the nose and an inch back inside the head. And that's called the Ajna chakra. And its color is a very deep, deep blue violet. And everyone's heard of the third eye, like open your third eye. But this is your seat of intuition. And this is where you receive information from that which is higher, that which is outside of you. It comes through the third eye and then comes into embodiment, right? It has to come into embodiment. So it's very important. So it's intuition, but it's also the seat of logic. And people think of those things as two very different things, but one should inform the other, otherwise you're screwed. So there's that. And then you've got, and I always butcher this name, but the Shashara, which is above the crown of the head. Some people say it's white. Some people say it's purple. And that is where we receive, like it's our actual receptor. And that's where we have a sense of there being something higher than us, right? A source. And it's where we receive direction from the source. So any of these places having blocks can cause the energy in other chakras to manifest differently or to also be blocked. There's something that some folks refer to as, for example, escape pod syndrome, where if you're damaged in one of these lower chakras, you escape to your head so that you don't have to be embodied. And these people are the people who are, it can go two different ways, who are so whimsical that it's really hard to get them to do things that they need to do to function in daily life because they're so in their imagination, they've escaped there. Or they're like Spock, except like a super deluxe dark version of Spock that everything has to be logical or it doesn't exist. You know, so those are the ones that hyper think through everything, overthink, you know, and that's usually comes from being damaged somewhere in the lower chakras. So they're trying to circumvent any problems that they might have ahead of time, like putting out fires before the fires exist, kind of thing. So the way the energy moves through all these chakras affects everything, you know. And we have patterns, right? So you were talking, all of you were talking about clearing your chakras. You can do that, right? So like I, for example, do some Reiki and energy work, and I can read your chakras, and I can do that. I can say, okay, this is blocked. I can help you send some energy there, or we could go through some breath work or yoga postures, and that chakra might, when I read it again, might be opened up. But you could go take a walk, and if that is your normal functioning pattern, it's going to go right back to the way that it was. Right. So that's what people need to understand when they're going and getting energy work to open their chakras. Why does it not last? It's not going to last if you don't start doing the inner work to change the pattern itself. You know, if that makes sense. So we all have various patterns throughout different points of our lives, functioning patterns. Sometimes we'll purposefully close off some of the chakras, like we know that we're doing it. Other times it's unconscious. And when I read chakras, I can usually get a sense of whether it's conscious or unconscious blocking. But yeah, synopsis.
Something I wanted to add about the third eye chakra. And it's just from my experience. And sometimes, I guess this is honestly probably why I'm, I guess, very happy I even got into chakra work. Because my opinion, if I didn't, going by like, again, I'd say I could feel these things. So I guess if I didn't have that experience, I don't think I probably ever, in my opinion, that if I crossed the abyss, I don't think that ever would have happened. And I'm going to explain why. Is like a lot of times, you know, I talk about, you know, the eclipse of the black sun. And then I say it always starts off as like a pin dot and kind of like a darkening more than what's already dark in my vision. That can easily come to me all the time. It's just holding it and being able to keep it there, and not just going away or looking like it's almost like moving, or just, you know, disappearing and popping up somewhere later on. I had noticed, and it's really weird to me, and it's almost like, you know, am I like locking onto it? But if I start to see it, and if I focus on my third eye and kind of like put extreme pressure on it, it seems to hold the dot there. And then that's when everything starts to take place. So it's like I have to use my third eye and focus. And it's almost like I'm going cross-eyed too as I'm doing it, to where it's like now I lock onto it. And either I'm going towards it or I'm pulling it towards me now. You know, so again, I don't think I ever would have experienced that unless I was messing around with my third eye chakra. Mm-hmm. That's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. So I guess, yeah, I mean, that's just my experience with the third eye one, and why I think for me it's important to acknowledge those energies, because it definitely did something for me. You know, and even in that point too, which is weird, when I have that experience and you feel that extreme, for me, extreme energy, or like, I don't know what it is, but like I do feel something. Like when that happens and there's a click, it's like almost there's that, and then like the bottom shooting up is like if I was at a carnival and you do like the thing with the hammer and you ring the bell to see how hard you can hit the thing. It's as if like that happens at the same time you feel something over here as well. And it's like, poof, there's like some connection, and then I go somewhere else. But yeah, I don't think it would have happened unless I was able to play around with that energy there.
Yeah, and what you're talking about there, you said from the bottom. So the Muladhara, the cousin in the upper, is the Ajna. So you've got creativity, root, and Ajna, and then the Manipura and the Shastra. So yeah, you're going to feel it move. And like Lisa, like you were saying, the tears that came without you like making them come, you know, a lot of times that's an experience that's pretty common in a yoga class. And folks often don't know why, but a lot of times it's because energy that was stagnant moved, you know, and it's a release of the body. You get into your parasympathetic nervous system and your body just lets go, and those tears come, you know, as a cleansing of that. So you definitely, I think even people who don't believe in these energy centers literally have experiences where, oh, something shifted. You know, everyone has had those experiences. Oh, something's not right. Gut feelings are an example of it, you know. So they're there, however way you want to look at them, you know, and yeah, they're important. And they can be used again as tools for self-development in a practical sense. You know, it's not just woo.
Yeah. Kelly, if I may, I wanted to kind of make a couple of comments. You had mentioned how the triangle is downward and the triangle is upward at the top, right? No, that is not me saying that I'm an Illuminati, but sorry, I had to say that.
I'll throw up my hand
But,
signs.
one thing I wanted to mention in that, at least in what is taught, right? This is what is taught, not to say that I fully subscribe to this, but just what is taught. In evolutionary biology, we are taught that the gut is the second brain, and that the gut itself, depending on its microflora, depending on what is, you know, going on in there, whether it is stable or not stable, what is healthy or not healthy, it actually functions as a brain, and that the gut and the brain do communicate via whatever is involved. And so one of the things when you said that about the gut, and then you kind of, you know, went with the other triangle, as well as a gut feeling, the gut is the oldest portion of our body, evolutionarily speaking. If we were to take our DNA from today all the way back, you know, whatever, millions of years, the first thing to develop within our ancestral DNA was the gut itself. And then we developed the brain. And so the brain is second oldest, right? And so I wanted to mention that. And then the other thing you talked about, again, the downward triangle and then the throat chakra. What's interesting that you said that, I do know from at least like an oncology standpoint, the throat cells, like the actual tissue of the cells of the throat, is identical to the cervix. And it almost makes me feel like the throat is the communication vessel, and so is the cervix. I think we are somewhat in the primary stages of understanding how the cervix communicates, but, you know, to the rest of our body as well as to the world, we're more fluid with how our throat functions in terms of communication. But I do think that the cervix itself does communicate with the outside world as well as the inside of ourselves. But I find it interesting that you have the gut, you have the reproductive organs, and you have the mirroring of the top part, and how the throat and the cervix biologically, they're identical in the cell and tissue structures.
And they look the same.
And
if
they
you
look
at them.
Yes, and they look the same.
If you just glance, you think you're looking at the same thing.
Yes.
You know, which is awesome. It just awe-inspiring. To me, it just proves, I don't know. But yeah, and coming back to what you said about the gut being the second brain, I'll oftentimes, when I'm teaching meditative things, styles, I will use that science, because our body knows our emotions before our brain has time to register them. Yes. Because of that.
Yes.
So our body will start feeling things before we even know how we feel.
Yes.
Which to me is just amazing. So I'm like, you want to know how you feel? Settle down, ask your body. Your body will
Right.
tell you exactly how you're feeling.
Right.
You know, again, being embodied is crucial to having awareness of how we're actually showing up, because we'll tell ourselves, "Oh, I'm fine," and our nervous system is jacked. You know? It's the science is amazing. I'm glad you brought that up because
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me.
Mhm.
Absolutely, and to me, it proves that it's important to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to what Lisa and Kelly were just saying, it's super important. Like, I don't know, Kelly, if you have any experience with prenatal yoga or
Mhm.
like, yeah. So something I used to teach to my prenatal classes all the time is the connection between the throat and the cervix. So like literally in labor, you know, like a lot of women will scream because it hurts real bad, right? Instead of screaming, if you can harness your energy into your throat, and you know how like, okay, common thing for people to visualize with yoga is the om, right? So if you can make like a low vowel tone in your throat, it will actually help you to dilate faster in the cervix, and you stay calm as opposed to tightening. You get your sympathetic nervous system. You want to activate the parasympathetic and visualize like the throat opening, and it will help you dilate faster. Testament, I've done it myself in childbirth. It really does work. So
It
it's
really
pretty
does work.
crazy how like Lisa just backed it up with like the actual science. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I used to also be a doula and a midwifery
Nice.
apprentice, childbirth educator. So yeah, it's
Perfect.
the low, you know, growl, groan.
Yeah.
And even if you think about, so we have the 4 major diaphragms in the body. You've got your pelvic floor, you've got your breathing muscle, you've got your soft palate in your throat, and the fontanelle or the soft spot in the head. And they all move up and down when you breathe and create your inter-abdominal pressure. You know, so if you're that diaphragm is dropping, all the diaphragms are dropping, which is going to take the pressure downward rather than upward.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
so
I'm glad.
it's all scientific.
I'm
too,
glad
yeah.
you mentioned that, because I even thought, this is my opinion. Again, I'm not giving the guy. Even then, I think this stuff is taken from prior stuff anyway. Because again, Crowley didn't write all these rituals, but Crowley, you know, in his ritual books on the pentagram, Libra O, and the hexagram and stuff like that, he always focused on vibrating certain parts. Like, and he like to exhaustion, it should be done.
Mm-hmm.
But he, certain words would be like in bold that he, you know, you had to vibrate. There was something up with doing shit with your like that. And I believe it was, honestly, I do believe that there was some, like, he may have understood there was like some sort of science in that.
Each chakra has what's called a Bij mantra, and you can use Brahmari breathing, and it's actually vibrating each of the chakras with the Bij mantras. So, of course, the lower you go, the sound is lower, and the higher you go, the sound is higher. But you can inhale and then vibrate that sound. You know, some of them Ram, Lam, Yam, you know, and it goes up, Ham, and it goes up and gets higher and higher and higher. Yeah. So you're vibrating them. You can do all of them, which I've done before. It's intense.
There's a thing called the middle pillar ritual, and I think you only go through 5 of the spheres. But I like the kind of it's my opinion, like almost like what you were saying, like you kind of start going through them, and you have to vibrate, you know, the name of that sphere. They suggest like a certain, you know, if you're going to do it, keep doing it the same way. So I would do it 3 times for each sphere, you know, or you could do 5 times each one, but, you know, just same for each sphere. But yeah, there was something, that was another thing where I started thinking like there's something behind like actual, like, the vibration. It's just, I find it interesting where you have this stuff where they're focusing on making sound, but then there is that whole thing of silence as well. So I started thinking there must be some sort of correlation here. Something's going on, I think, vibrationally, scientifically, and magically, you know.
In the beginning was the word, you know.
Yes.
It went from silence to word, you know, and what are we doing? We're crossing, you know. We're sending energy, we're directing energy, we're co-creating with the word.
Yeah, even if you want to go with, oh, well, first there was light, that's sound anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very interesting.
That's all good.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is.
Was there anything else that like Lisa or Teresa that you wanted to talk about or bring up? Might wrap it up soon. That's why I'm asking.
I just had written a note earlier when Kelly was talking about the different chakras and whatnot, and breaking patterns, like when you do energy work on people and then they go back out into their daily life and then their issue just like returns immediately. I just wanted to bring it back to like the importance of meditation and like self-work, because like you could see all the Reiki practitioners you want, do all the therapy you want, but in the end, like that's why self-meditation and like having some sort of like a spiritual practice is really important, because it allows you that observation time. Like when you are just sitting still and breathing, it allows you to see like where you have problems, where you have issues. Some of us, we all have energy centers where we're more powerful than others naturally, right? Like some people might be a very gifted communicator and then their throat chakra is like completely open, right? Or for some people, they want to say something and they can't. So like they have like tightness in the throat. Or like when you're in an anxious situation, you'll feel that like when you interact maybe with certain family members or whatnot, you'll be like, I can't speak, or you feel that anxiety like in certain places in your body. So having like a meditative practice is super important to allow yourself like the space to catch those moments, like what Lisa was talking about when she had like time sort of slow down around her, like those moments where you can like break the pattern. It just gives you that like little split second of space to interject or not identify with the thought as you normally would, and like going back into that like knee-jerk pattern of behavior, right? So I think it's like super important, and relates to that hot topic of trauma. We hear trauma like all the time, but it's true. We all have traumas, big and small, and that's how we break past the pattern, is to have that strong like self-meditative practice, whether it's like through movement or formally sitting down or through prayer, like whatever it is for people that work, just to give you that space to break the pattern and not react maybe as you normally knee-jerk would, right?
Absolutely. And that, it comes back to the Jung quote that's quoted all the time, making the unconscious conscious.
Yes.
And that split second when you can see that thing and you're like, oh, even just being able to identify it is going to help you start to change it. If you want to change it, right, you've got to be willing to get out of that comfort zone. But yes, this, and I hope I've written my book to be a practical tool, because I did. I showed how the traumas that I have experienced, the patterns that I saw in myself applied to each of these chakras. And yeah, you can see all the practitioners, the gurus, the therapists, that you want. But unless you're willing to get down and do that work, that inner work, not a lot's going to change. You're going to constantly need these people. So what I tell folks all the time is use that as a scaffolding to unpack yourself. Then take that to the people that you're seeing. Take that to your therapist and say, I found this. Do you have any tools for me to address it? Do it in tandem. Get relief. Yeah, get relief. But be willing also to take what you learn and apply it in a very, very practical way. We've got to make these unconscious patterns conscious, or they'll rule our life and we'll call them fate. It's true. That's why people repeat it over and over.
You're right. Yeah. That's really well said.
Yes. Lisa, was there anything that maybe you wanted to add?
No, just this has
questions?
been like do what?
Or any questions or anything? Yeah.
Oh no. I'm just trying to absorb as much as I can. This has just been very enlightening for me. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just all that.
Just wanted to make sure nobody was left with like, oh, I wanted to ask this.
No, it's one of those things to where all these ideas are going off, because everything that Kelly is saying and Teresa is saying, it matches almost identical biologically. It matches identical to everything that I'm learning, with physiology, anatomy, and it's just it's overwhelming. Let's put it that way. That how much is like the redundancy, over and over, and how much they all support each other, like they form a triangle in terms of information, with spirituality, with, metaphysical, with the physical. And so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. One thing I did want to, I guess like kind of like say about this whole topic. First off, I thought this was a great show. It was really even though we didn't get into the chakras right away, I thought all this stuff was great that we talked about. And for me, I can only go by my experiences of what I did to get where I got with magic. And, like I had said before, sometimes the meditation and the chakra work just doesn't sound all that exciting, or that, I guess maybe it isn't eye-catching in a title. So sometimes I really haven't covered it that much. But I do think for me, it must be important, because I don't really think there was too many things that I was wasting my time on to get where I got. I'm just assuming that what I was doing is what also aided me there. And, breath work, meditation, and the chakra stuff was actually huge in my regimen. It was just, I just don't talk about it that much, I guess, but, so I guess like what I'm getting at is I really do think that this stuff, for me, I do think, again, like I was even talking about with the third eye, I just don't think I would ever have been able to have the beautiful experiences or be blessed with the experiences that I had with magic unless I did all of this. So for me, there's something there. If it is of importance, hopefully, maybe after people listen to this episode, they'll think a little bit more about it, and you'll find your own way to have this, same journey, So, yeah, that's why I do want to, maybe actually in the future touch on these things a little bit more. And another reason why I think this stuff is very important too is I have to say, just even from my own progression in occult studies, getting more into physiology and the body and certain things, it just seems to even make sense to me that this stuff is probably actually some more of the occult science or the secrets of secrets, believe it or not. If you start to understand how this stuff is actually really within your body, and there's a change, an alchemy in a sense, to have these experiences with God across the abyss. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I really had a great talk. It wasn't a normal 2-hour episode like the Occult Rejects sometimes do, but I do think this was actually a really good talk, and I'm really happy we spoke about it, because, again, it's not something that I bring to the show that much, but I think with all of us here, I think this discussion was actually very magical. So thank you all. And again, Kelly, I'm really happy I finally got you on the show, because I have to say this has been one of my favorite shows in a long time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity quite a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, and if anybody's listening and they want to reach out, I'm on Instagram mostly at darkmoon_Kelly, and my website's Kelli Hansel, like HanselandGretel.com. You can find the book there and other things that I offer. But I'm always happy to talk, especially, on this topic and the science of it and all of that. I geek out on that stuff. So
Yes.
it's cool.
Yo, and believe it or not,
y'all.
when she had first asked about coming on the show, I did I think I asked you a bunch of questions just to get an idea of stuff that you're into. And you actually are into some pretty, you'd call young, you obviously have studied, and you're very much I was kind of impressed. So yeah, I think this lady has an idea about a few things. So please go check out her work. And she does some very impressive stuff I included her YouTube and her Instagram channel. Stuff that I don't think I could ever physically do with my body. It's impossible. So go check it out. I would break something. So definitely go check out her work. Again, all her stuff is in the links, in the show notes now. Yes, Lisa, do you want to say anything before we wrap it up? Plug yourself again.
Just Kelly, thank you so much for enlightening us with all of your stuff. And genuinely enjoyed the discussion. As far as for me, again, Lisa Solis, it would be Solis Lisa in Twitter and Lisa Solis on Instagram, and then occultresearchinstitute.org as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Teresa, would you like to remind everybody about your amazing show as well and where they can find you?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Kelly. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and you're obviously very knowledgeable, which I appreciate. And yeah, people can find more of me on the Spiritual Gangsters and connect with me at TS Gangsters Pod on X and Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you again. Yeah, thank you all three for coming on. I mean, this was, kind of like Saturday morning for some people, technically. So I appreciate all three of you being able to get up and being camera ready and awake and bring in a great show, And thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
And honestly, thank you for everybody who was in the chat, too. I mean, we had a lot of comments. I mean, there was people that haven't really seen that often, and I guess maybe this time was good for them, so it was nice to see them adding when they normally don't. That's what's up. That's why I like going live, because I really do think, again, there's people that I would almost say is part of the Occult Rejects just because they show up constantly in the chat and add shit. There's a lot of good stuff in there, man. So,
Totally.
yeah. And again, this was one of those episodes. So definitely go check out the replay if it's up, and the really good comments that I happen to catch are on the screen. So maybe if you're on YouTube or the video, try to catch some of the comments, because like they do really help the show up as well. Thank you again, everybody in the live. That's what's up, and that's the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.
Later.